Have you ever noticed that month-long gap between a state seceding and them joining the Confederacy? Have you ever wondered what happened in that time? You probably haven't, but I have, and I made a YouTube video about Florida specifically, because that's the coolest state. Florida was the third state to secede on January 10th, 1861. That sounds like it'd be controversial, and it was. Several newspapers advocated against secession, and one Seminole War commander also opposed secession. After Florida had seceded, he exclaimed,
"And what have you done? You have opened the gates of hell, from which shall flow the curses of the damned, which shall sink you to perdition."
Now these anti-secessionists weren't anti-slavery. That Richard Call guy owned slaves. Anywho, as we know, the secessionists would get what they wanted, and on January 10th, the Florida Secession Convention decided they wanted to leave, and they flew this flag at the Capitol building. But why did they secede? Well, they wrote an unpublished document with that information on it. I was gonna read a quote from the document, but it turned out really long. So TLDR, slavery, that's the reason. Speaking of slavery, they also made a new constitution on the same day they seceded. For some reason, they kept the 3/5 compromise. I also think they claimed all the land between Florida and the Mississippi River, but I'm stupid, and maybe I'm misinterpreting this. Also, only white men had the right to bear arms. Anywho, that's boring politics stuff. You know what's really interesting? War. The federal government was planning on destroying the only arsenal in Florida. The governor didn't like the sound of that though, so a few days before the state even seceded, Madison Perry commanded Florida militia to go take the arsenal, which they were able to do by just showing up and having a bigger army. That's not saying much though, because the arsenal was defended by a total of 4 people. Meanwhile, on January 12th, rebel militia under William Henry Chase captured the Pensacola Navy Yard and flew this flag. A Union military commander, Adam Slemmer, doesn't think he's going to be able to defend Fort Barrancas and Fort McRee. He's also received orders to not let the Floridians take Fort Pickens, so he abandons his current post for Fort Pickens. Now, Fort Pickens is awesome. Not even the creator could break into it. We know this because the creator is William Chase. Chase asked Slemmer to surrender many times. The first time he sent a message to the fort, it said this: "Listen to me then, I beg of you, and act with me in preventing the shedding of blood of your brethren. Surrender the fort, and you and your command may reoccupy the barracks and quarters at Barrancas, and your simple patrol to remain there quietly until ordered away, or to resume the command in Fear Harbor, should an adjustment of present difficulties in the Union be arrived at. Consider this well, and take great care that you will act as so to have no fearful recollections of a tragedy that you might have averted, but rather to make the present moment one of the most glorious, because Christian-like, of your life." A day later, Slemmer replied with, "Under the orders we have now from the War Department, we've decided, after consultation with the government officers in the harbor, that it is our duty to hold our position until such a force is brought against us as to render it impossible to defend it, or until the political conditions of the country is so as to induce us to surrender the public property in our keeping to such authorities, as it may be delegated legally to receive it. We deprecate as much as you the shedding of blood of our brethren. However, we must consider you the aggressors, and if blood is shed, then you are responsible therefore." So the two sides were just pointing guns at each other. There were a few times they fired musket shots at each other, but no one was ever actually hurt. Eventually, a Florida senator makes a deal with James Buchanan that Florida wouldn't attack the fort as long as it wasn't reinforced by the Federals. This obviously changed once the Civil War got started. Fort Pickens would be reinforced. The Confederates would try to attack in 1862. This was after Chase left, by the way, and they lost. Later that year, the Confederates would surrender at Pensacola completely. So, what did Florida do as an independent nation? Well, they just spent a lot of time preparing for the Civil War. I made this as a short little video to quickly put out there. Maybe I'll make more videos on the others soon-to-be Confederate states. I've read some Wikipedia pages on Texas, and that one seems particularly interesting. Anyhow, goodbye.